The letter came in the morning, just like any other. Except this time it was a bill, $200,000. For my daughter's wedding, a wedding I wasn't even invited to, the same daughter who'd left me behind 12 years ago. No calls, no messages, nothing. And now, after all this time, she wanted money. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation. No, she wanted me to pay, to cover the cost of a celebration I didn't even get the chance to be a part of. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you said you're listening from. I hadn't heard from Anna in years, 12 years to be exact. The last time I saw her, we fought. I don't even remember what started it. Maybe it was my absence, or maybe it was the years of disappointment I had unintentionally layered onto her. But I know one thing for sure. She accused me of abandoning her. I tried to explain, tried to tell her that things weren't as simple as she thought. But it didn't matter. She'd shut me out, just like that. And I hadn't heard a word from her since. I stood in my kitchen now, staring at the envelope. The return address was the same. Anna Mitchell. Her name had once been everything to me. The name I had whispered in joy when she was born. The name I had said in frustration when she threw her first tantrum. The name I had choked on as I begged her to forgive me all those years ago. But this was different. I tore open the envelope. Inside I found a thick stack of paper. The invoice, it was cold, clinical, no pleasantries. Just a straightforward demand, $200,000. The bill was addressed to me for services rendered by a list of vendors, florists, photographers, caterers, and a venue that seemed to be more suited for a royal wedding than anything else. What struck me hardest wasn't just the number, it was the due date. The wedding had already taken place. She wanted me to pay for something I wasn't even part of. I sat down at the kitchen table, letting the bill fall from my hands onto the surface in front of me. This wasn't just about money. This was a test, a power play. She thought I'd forget the last 12 years of hurt and just hand over the cash. She thought I was weak enough, desperate enough to want to mend what was broken. She didn't know me at all. I ran my hand through my hair and glanced out the window. The world outside felt distant, empty. My life had been quiet since the estrangement, a controlled calm I'd built over the years. But now everything felt unsettled. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear. It was the sharp sting of betrayal, of the realization that she hadn't changed, that this wasn't about her wedding at all. It was about me paying for her choices, for her manipulation. I thought back to that last conversation. The fight, her accusations. The words we'd said to each other that we could never take back. She'd thrown every failure of mine in my face, every mistake I'd made as a father, and maybe some of them were true. But she'd walked away first. She'd shut me out. And now, 12 years later, she thought she could rewrite the past with a bill. I picked up the phone and dialed John Miller's number. John had been my lawyer and a friend for over 20 years. He knew me, knew my history with Anna, and he knew how deeply this hurt, but he also knew I wasn't the kind of man to let something like this slide. Fabian, hey, he answered. His voice was steady, like he was already bracing for what was coming. I need you to do something for me, I said, my voice tight. It said us about Anna. Anna? His surprise was palpable. What sips happened? She sent me a bill. 200 grand, I said, the words feeling alien in my mouth. She wants me to pay for her wedding. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him shuffling papers and then, in the distance, a sigh. What are you going to do? Izette not paying it, I said, trying to sound firm. But something was unraveling inside me, something I couldn't set control. But I need to know everything, John. I need to understand what happened. I need to find out if she's been lying to me all these years. All right, he said. I shall dig into it. I shall start looking into her finances. See if there's such a pattern here. We shall get to the truth. I hung up and sat in the kitchen, staring at the bill again. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. The audacity of her to think that she could come back into my life after all these years and just demand I pay for something that wasn't even my fault. She was using guilt like a weapon, manipulating my past mistakes to make me feel responsible for her choices. But I wasn't responsible. I wasn't her bank. I wasn't her savior. She had done this before, I realized. Every time she needed something, she turned the tables on me. It was never about love. It was about control. She had learned how to manipulate me with guilt, how to use my love for her against me. But this time, I wouldn't be fooled. I had built my life again after all those years of grief. I wasn't going to let her tear it down with a single letter. The pieces were falling into place now. The wedding, the bill, the lies. This wasn't about reconciliation. It never had been. Anna wanted revenge. And she wanted to make me pay for everything I hadn't done, for everything I couldn't fix. But I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and went to the door. The game was just beginning, and I was ready to play. I wanted to ignore it, to let the bill sit there, to forget it ever came. I had built my life again after Anna left. Quietly, carefully. I wasn't going to let her tear everything apart. Not again, but the weight of that $200,000 bill pressed down on me in a way I couldn't shake off. Every time I tried to move past it, memories of the past came flooding back. The last time I saw Anna, the fight that tore us apart. I could still hear her voice in my head, sharp and cutting, accusing me of abandoning her. Maybe I did. Maybe I wasn't the father she needed me to be. But she wasn't the daughter I thought I raised either. She had built this narrative in her mind that I was the villain, the absentee father who never cared enough to show up. The truth was much more complicated, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking otherwise. Not anymore. The problem was that voice in my head wasn't quiet. Every day it got louder. Did I owe her? Was I wrong to let the years pass without reaching out? I told myself I had done my best. I tried to forgive her for the way she shut me out, but the silence between us had become a wall too thick to tear down. Still, I knew that somewhere deep down, I wasn't done with her yet. I couldn't be. I'd tried to reconcile before. There were letters, gifts, things I thought might get through to her. Things I hoped might open a door, but each time they were met with silence. She didn't want to hear from me. She didn't want my apologies. She didn't want my attempts at fixing what had been broken. She wanted to rewrite the story in her own way. And now, with this bill, she wanted me to pay for the mistakes she refused to forgive. It wasn't just about the money. No. This was about control. This was about her making me pay for her hurt. The hurt I had caused her, according to her narrative. I ran my hand over the stack of papers on the kitchen table again, feeling the sharp corners of the bill digging into my palm. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just asking for money. She was asking for something more. She was asking me to prove I still cared. She was asking me to do what I couldn't, to forget what had happened and pretend like everything was okay. To give in to her version of the truth. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly across the floor. My mind raced. I was sick of being manipulated. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into doing what she wanted anymore. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about control. It was always about control. I thought about reaching out to Clara, to ask her what she thought about this. She had always been the one to mediate between Anna and me when things got tough. But Clara wasn't the one I needed right now. This was my battle. I had to fight it on my own. I'd spent so many years building my life without Anna in it. I couldn't let her back in just because she'd found a way to make me feel responsible again. I walked over to the phone, grabbed it from the counter, and dialed John's number. He picked up quickly, like he was expecting my call. "Phobian," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But she sent me a bill," I repeated, fighting to keep my voice steady. $200,000 for the wedding. She wants me to pay for it. "Yeah, I remember you telling me about that," John replied. "What are you thinking? You said you're not just going to write her a check, are you?" "Hell no," I said, my tone harsher than I intended. "I want to know everything, John. I need to know what She-Sip's been doing all these years. I need to understand how She-Sip's built this life, and why this is happening now. I'm not going to let her manipulate me again." "All right," John said. After a pause, I said I'll get started on looking into it. Let's just see if we can find anything that will shed some light on her motives. I hung up the phone and sat back down at the table. I couldn't let this go. It was bigger than the money. It was about something deeper. Anna had been hiding something. I could feel it in my bones. I didn't know what it was yet, but I was going to find out. I wasn't going to let her control this story any longer. I wasn't going to fall for Anna's game again. The bill wasn't just a bill, it was a trap, and I wasn't going to step right into it without knowing exactly what I was dealing with. So I went straight to John. I didn't waste any time. We need to gather everything. I need to know what she's been hiding, what she's been up to all these years, I told him when I called. John had a way of calming me down, even in the heat of my anger. We still get to the bottom of this, but you need to stay focused. This isn't set just about the money anymore. You need to know what set's really been doing. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was capable of staying calm. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was personal. This was the daughter I once knew, the daughter I'd tried to understand and forgive. But now, every time I thought about the wedding bill, I saw only the manipulation, the twisted sense of entitlement she had developed over the years. She wanted to make me the villain. She wanted to make me pay for everything she had built, everything I'd failed to give her. But I wasn't going to let her rewrite this story. I called Sarah Watts, the private investigator John recommended. She wasn't the kind to waste time. Within a week, she had a report ready for me. It wasn't just the bill, it was everything. Anna had been hiding debt for years, running up credit cards, making financial moves that should have raised red flags. She was deep in it, and I wasn't the one who had caused it, but she was trying to make it my responsibility. I sifted through the files Sarah had sent over, bank statements, receipts, credit reports. All of it painted a picture of financial ruin, of a woman who had used every excuse to justify her overspending. She was out of control, and now she was trying to make me pay for it. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about manipulation, lies, and a pattern I'd missed all these years. The truth was out there, and I was going to make sure it saw the light of day. I wasn't going to rush this. The last thing I wanted was to give Anna the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. No, this time I was going to play it smart, calculated. Every move needed to be measured, every decision thought through. I started with the wedding vendors. I made calls, one after the other, quietly, methodically. I reached out to each one on the list from the bill. The florists, the photographers, the caterers. I didn't mention Anna's name directly, just my need to clear up a few things regarding the charges. It was important that they knew I wasn't going to pay a single cent of that bill, not a penny. As I made my way through the list, I felt a small satisfaction. Anna was so sure I would just fold, write the check, and disappear into the background again. She underestimated me. I wasn't just going to let her manipulate me again. I was going to make sure that everyone knew the truth. Next, I reached out to a few of our old family friends. Some hadn't heard from Anna in years either. I wasn't looking to stir up trouble, but I knew they could give me pieces of the puzzle. They confirmed what I already suspected. Anna had been using her story of abandonment to manipulate people into doing what she wanted, emotionally blackmailing them into covering for her. I wasn't going to be part of that anymore. This wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about making sure Anna couldn't keep hiding behind a lie. The truth was mine now, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The pieces were slowly falling into place. Soon everyone would know. I wasn't just going to send her a letter and let it end. No, this wasn't going to be a simple back and forth. I was going to expose everything. Every lie, every manipulative tactic. And I had the evidence to back it up. Sarah had done her part. Her report was detailed, a financial history that painted a clear picture of Anna's reckless spending, hidden debts, and emotional manipulation. I had all the receipts, every piece of evidence that proved she had been playing me all these years. Anna wasn't the victim she wanted everyone to believe she was. She had been hiding behind a facade of innocence, and I was ready to tear it down. I spent days carefully crafting my response. Every word, every sentence had to count. I wasn't going to give her any room to twist the truth. The letter I wrote wasn't just a rejection of her bill, it was a declaration of the truth. I laid out everything, the debts, the lies, the manipulation. I even included the financial records Sarah had uncovered. It wasn't just a personal attack, it was a statement. Anna had tried to make me the villain. She had tried to paint me as the one who owed her, but I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story. Not anymore. I sealed the letter, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. This wasn't closure. It was justice. The fight wasn't over, but the first shot had been fired. I knew the truth was mine now, and it was going to cost her. I never planned on going to Anna's wedding. I didn't want to be there, didn't want to play the role of the estranged father suddenly showing up to save the day. But I had to. I had to be there to expose her for what she really was. The wedding was her stage, and she thought she could perform her little show of manipulation without consequence. I wasn't going to let that happen. I walked into the venue with a calm I didn't feel. The place was beautiful, extravagant. Everything about it screamed excess. Everything Anna had wanted, but I wasn't sure if she really understood the cost. Not just the money, but the cost of using people, using me for her own gain. I spotted her across the room, laughing with her new husband, surrounded by family and friends who had no idea what had been happening behind the scenes. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know what she had done to me, what she had done to herself. But I wasn't here to ruin the celebration. No, I was here to make sure the truth came out. It was time for her game to end. I waited until the right moment, when the noise was at its peak and everyone was distracted by the festivities. Then I stepped forward and addressed the crowd. The room fell silent. "Anna," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "'Tis time to stop pretending. This wedding, this whole charade, is built on lies." I watched her face fall. I could see the shock, the anger, but more than that, I could see the fear. The truth was finally out. The wedding showdown wasn't enough. Exposing Anna in front of her guests didn't bring the closure I needed. It was just the beginning. Now I had to make sure this went all the way. I couldn't let her continue to manipulate me, or anyone else, without facing the consequences. So I filed a counterclaim. Anna had sued me for the $200,000 wedding bill, but I wasn't going to sit idly by. I had the evidence. I had the truth. This wasn't going to be her story anymore. It was mine. The courtroom was a different kind of battlefield. I could feel the tension in the air as Anna sat across from me, her lawyer beside her, all smug smiles and rehearsed arguments. But I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. I had spent the past few weeks preparing. Every document was in order. Every financial record, every conversation, every piece of evidence, all meticulously laid out. When it was my turn, I stood tall. My lawyer, John, had already laid the foundation. Now it was time for the truth to take center stage. I turned to the judge, and with quiet confidence I began. "Your Honor, what my daughter has done is more than just an attempt to financially exploit me. This is a pattern of manipulation, of using guilt to control and to destroy." Anna's lawyer tried to interrupt, but I didn't stop. I had the receipts, I had the proof, and I wasn't about to back down. By the time the hearing ended, the judge had seen through the lies. Anna had lost. I had won. But victory didn't feel like relief. It felt like a strange, hollow justice. The aftermath wasn't what I expected. I thought once I'd won, once I'd exposed Anna for what she was, I'd feel some sense of relief. But instead I felt emptiness. There was no satisfaction in watching her lose. There was no joy in seeing her humiliation. Anna lost everything. Her friends, her social circle, they all turned on her when the truth came out. She had been manipulating them, using guilt to get what she wanted, just like she had tried with me. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Clara was by my side through it all, but even she couldn't understand why I felt so hollow. "You did the right thing, Fabian," she kept telling me. "You stood up for yourself. You got the justice you deserved." But it didn't feel like justice. It felt like a war I never wanted to fight. It felt like I had lost something much bigger than just a relationship with my daughter. I had lost my peace, my hope for reconciliation. I sat in silence for days, staring at the walls, wondering what the point of it all was. I had fought for the truth. I had won. But now, with Anna out of my life for good, I realized something. The victory didn't heal the pain. It didn't undo the years of heartache. In the end, Anna had taken everything from me, not just my money, but my family, my future. And maybe, just maybe, I had let her. I sat in the silence of my house, the hum of the fridge the only sound breaking the stillness. It had been weeks since the court case, since the wedding, since everything blew up in my face, and yet nothing felt resolved. I had gotten justice, but it wasn't the kind of victory I imagined. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel closure. What I felt was a gnawing emptiness, the kind that doesn't fade. Anna was gone from my life for good. And while I should have been happy about that, I wasn't. There was no satisfaction in seeing her fall, no happiness in watching the people she'd manipulated turn their backs on her. Clara tried to talk to me about it, but I couldn't explain. She'd never truly understood the weight of what Anna had taken from me. And now, even though I had gotten the truth out, I didn't know if I could ever forgive her or myself. I thought back to the days when Anna was a little girl before everything went wrong. I wondered what happened to her. How did she become this person? Was it my fault? Had I failed her that badly? Could I have done more? The questions were endless, but the answers were impossible to find. In the end, the damage had been done, the wounds had healed over, but the scars would always remain. I had gotten the justice I sought, but at what cost? I'd lost my daughter. I'd lost my family. And in a way, I had lost myself. Sometimes you have to walk away. But walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means finding peace, even if it's not the peace you thought you'd get. I realized that the fight wasn't about the money or the revenge. It was about closure, the closure I had been searching for all these years. Anna had forced my hand and I had to stand my ground. But in the end, what had I really won? I had exposed her lies. I had gotten the justice I deserved. But the cost was more than I could have imagined. I sat on the porch, staring at the quiet street, the distant sound of traffic humming in the background. It was a crisp winter morning, just like the one 12 years ago when everything fell apart. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then, but in some ways it still felt like yesterday. Anna wasn't coming back, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her for what she'd done, or forgive myself for not being the father I should have been, but I had to accept it. I had to find peace in what was left. You didn't lose me, I whispered to the empty air, though I knew she wouldn't hear it. I stood up and walked back inside, the door clicking shut behind me. It was time to move on. The past was behind me, and I was ready to find a new future, one where I wasn't defined by betrayal. But even as I said those words, something deep inside me remained unsettled. It was hard to ignore the echo of the past. The pain of it all was still there just beneath the surface. I had tried to convince myself that it was over, that the court case and the exposure of Anna's manipulation had marked the end of it all. But there was no clean break. There was no simple resolution. Days turned into weeks, and the silence continued to weigh on me. I threw myself into my work, trying to keep busy, trying to keep my mind from wandering back to Anna. But the moments of quiet were the hardest. That's when the memories would surface, flashes of her as a child, the warmth of her small hand in mine, the laughter we shared before everything fell apart. And then the bitter taste of betrayal would creep in, reminding me of what I had lost. I hadn't expected things to be easy. I knew that, but I hadn't anticipated this hollow feeling either. It was like something vital had been ripped out of me, leaving behind a void. I couldn't just move on, not when every day felt like I was carrying around the weight of the years we'd lost. I had won the battle, yes, but the war was far from over. It wasn't long before Clara came to visit again. She was concerned, and though she didn't say it, I could see the worry in her eyes. She could sense that I was still struggling. She'd always been there for me, even when I didn't want to admit I needed help. "You've been quiet lately," she said, as we sat in the living room, the fire crackling softly. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something, a sign that I was okay, or at least getting there. I didn't know how to explain it to her. How could I tell her that the victory, the justice, didn't heal the wound? How could I put into words the relentless feeling of being stuck in a past that refused to fade, even though I had done everything I could to move forward? It sets just a lot, Clara. It sets not just the fight, it sets everything. The years I lost with her, The things I never got to say. The things I didn't set do. The truth is supposed to set you free, but I don't set feel free. I just feel empty. Clara nodded, understanding more than she let on. It's a hard thing, Fabian. What you went through, what you fought for. You're still grieving, and that's okay. Don't rush it. The healing, the moving on, it's not something you can force. You've done the hard part. Now it's time to let yourself heal. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. But how do you let go of something that's been a part of you for so long? How do you forgive when you don't even know if forgiveness is possible? Clara didn't have an answer, and I didn't expect her to. Some things I realized didn't have simple solutions. There was no magic cure for the deep, lingering pain I carried. There was no way to undo the years of separation, the hurt that had been left unspoken. The weeks wore on, and though I tried to push forward, life had a way of pulling me back. I began to notice subtle changes, the quiet reminders that Anna was still somehow part of my life, even from a distance. I'd see someone in town who knew her, or hear a passing mention of her name, and it would hit me like a wave. The reality that she was out there living her life, while I remained stuck in the wreckage of ours. One afternoon I found myself walking down the street, deep in thought. My feet took me to the old house, the one Anna and I had lived in before everything fell apart, the place where the memories still clung to every corner like a ghost I couldn't escape. It wasn't my house anymore, but it felt like it belonged to me just as much as it ever had. I stood in front of the gate for a moment, staring at the front door. For the first time in a long while, I felt the sting of regret, regret for not trying harder, regret for the distance that had formed between us. What would have happened if I had reached out? Would things have been different, or was this always going to be the way it ended? I wasn't sure if I would ever find the answers to those questions, but standing there, I made a promise to myself. It wasn't about Anna anymore. It wasn't about the past. It was about me. I couldn't keep living in a story that didn't belong to me anymore. I had to create my own future. So I turned away from the house and began walking again. This time with purpose. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it was mine to take, and I had no intention of letting anyone, not Anna, not anyone, dictate my path anymore. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick, but for the first time in a long time I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't done yet. I still had time to rebuild, to find peace, and maybe, just maybe, find a new version of family along the way. Anna had made her choices. I had made mine, and while we may never find our way back to each other, I was learning to let go. Not because I had to, but because I deserved to. The days passed, and I found myself falling into a routine that wasn't filled with as much pain. It wasn't joy either, but it was something closer to peace. I had started running again, something I hadn't done in years. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement became a kind of therapy. It was simple, it was honest, and it gave me time to think, or sometimes to not think at all. I stopped checking the mail every day, a habit I'd developed in the early weeks after the court case. The sight of that familiar mailbox felt like an invitation to dwell in the past. But over time, I let it go. If Anna wanted to reach out again, she would have to make the first move. I wasn't going to be the one to chase ghosts. But one particular morning, as the sun peeked through the blinds, I heard the soft sound of the mailbox creaking open. I hadn't even realized I'd been holding my breath until I let it out in a quiet sigh. My heart was still slow to catch up with the weight of the past, but the absence of Anna's name on anything in the mailbox had become a small form of relief. That was until the letter arrived. It wasn't sent to the usual envelope, it wasn't sent a bill or a legal letter, or anything formal. It was handwritten. The neat script on the front of the envelope stopped me in my tracks. Dad. I stood there in the kitchen, the envelope burning a hole in my hand, unable to move for a few seconds. I'd long since stopped expecting anything from Anna. After everything that had happened, I figured I was done. But this felt like a curveball I wasn't ready for. I opened the letter slowly, as if anticipating a bombshell that could rip through the fragile space I'd built around myself. But instead it was brief. Dad, I know I haven't reached out in a long time, and I don't expect things to go back to how they were. But I wanted to say that I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix things, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I've been thinking a lot lately, and I don't want to keep living with the guilt of what I did to you. I hope you're okay, and I hope that one day you can find a way to forgive me. Anna. I stared at the letter, the words feeling both like a weight and a release. For a moment, I just let the silence fill the room. Anna's apology, or whatever it was, didn't undo the years of hurt, nor did it fix the damage, but it was something. Maybe a small step forward. Maybe the beginning of something new. I didn't know yet. I folded the letter carefully, as though afraid it might tear if I held it too tightly, and set it on the table. The weight of the past was still with me, pressing down, but something in me loosened. Maybe it was the fact that she'd acknowledged the distance, or maybe it was just the simplicity of her words, but I could feel something shift just a little. The next morning I went for a run, the cold air biting at my skin. I pushed myself harder than usual, as though I could outrun the thoughts that had been creeping up on me for days. The letter, Anna's apology. My heart was still heavy, but I could feel the tension, the bitter knots that had been there for so long starting to unwind. Slowly, it wasn't about forgiveness, at least not yet. It wasn't about fixing what had been broken. But in that moment, I realized that maybe the only way to move forward, to truly move forward, was to stop trying to change the past. The weight of the bill, the court case, the estrangement, those things were never going to disappear. But I had the power to choose what I did with them now. I could either keep letting them define me, or I could let them go. As I ran, the miles stretched ahead of me, each step feeling lighter than the last. The anger and betrayal had dulled, replaced with something more manageable. Maybe it was acceptance. Maybe it was the realization that, at the end of it all, I had survived. I had made it through. After my run, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the world begin to wake up. The silence wasn't so oppressive anymore. It felt okay. I had begun to make peace with what had happened, with the choices I had made, and with the ones Anna had made. The truth was, there was no clear resolution here, no grand moment of forgiveness, but maybe that was okay. I still didn't know what Anna's next move would be, but for the first time, I wasn't waiting for it. I wasn't searching for some form of closure, or for her to change the way she saw things. What mattered now was that I had begun to heal. I had learned to accept the fact that I couldn't fix everything. That's not something I could control. But I could control how I responded, how I moved forward from here, and that was enough. Later that afternoon, I picked up the phone and dialed John's number. It had been a while since we'd talked, but I wanted to check in, to remind myself that I wasn't alone in this. "Hey, Fabian," he said after a few rings. "How's you been?" "I spun getting there," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "You?" John chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "Same, just a little less stressed now that the dust has settled." "Yeah, it's been quiet." I paused, reflecting on the peace I just found, or at least the calm I was starting to feel. "I got a letter from Anna." There was a long pause before John spoke again. "Oh, what did it say?" "She apologized," I said, almost surprised by how easy the words came. It wasn't set much, but it was something. "Sounds like a start," he said, his voice thoughtful. "You gonna reach out?" I thought about it. The answer wasn't crystal clear, but I could feel myself starting to untangle the web of guilt and anger that had been holding me hostage for so long. Maybe. But for now, I think I need some time. Than just trying to figure it out. "That's fair," John said. "Take all the time you need, man. You've been through a lot." "I know," I said, my voice softening. I don't want to go back to what we were. But maybe there's a chance for something different, someday." John was quiet for a moment. "Whatever you decide, I stop here. Don't forget that." I smiled a little, feeling a warmth I hadn't had felt in a long time. "Thanks, John." After the call ended, I sat back in my chair looking out at the street. The silence was no longer uncomfortable. It wasn't an absence, it was just space. Space to breathe, space to think. Maybe I hadn't gotten all the answers I was looking for, but I didn't need to have it all figured out. I was finally starting to let go of the need to control it all, and that, I realized, was the first step in finding my own peace. A few months passed. The initial weight of Anna's letter had faded, leaving me with a quiet acceptance I hadn't known I needed. The house, once filled with echoes of regret and unresolved pain, had taken on a different rhythm. The mornings were still calm, but now they were filled with purpose. I'd taken up a new hobby, gardening. At first, it had been a way to occupy my hands, to keep myself from dwelling too much on the past. But slowly, as the plants began to bloom, something in me did too. I wasn't sure what I expected to happen after Anna's letter. I wasn't sure what I wanted to happen. But I knew I wasn't going to chase an apology or a perfect ending. Instead, I started to focus on the things I could control. My own healing, my own path forward. Clara came by a few times, always supportive, but with the kind of quiet wisdom that made me think she understood more than she let on. One afternoon she sat with me in the garden as we drank iced tea, the summer sun hanging low in the sky. "You've come a long way, Fabian," Clara said, watching me as I carefully trimmed the hedge. "Yeah, I guess I have," I said, glancing at the vibrant flowers lining the garden beds. "I never thought I'd be the kind of person to find peace like this, you know." She smiled softly. "I don't think any of us do, but it's set's funny, isn't it? How we find things in the most unexpected places." I nodded, my gaze drifting toward the street. "It's strange, Clara, the way things end up. I thought this whole mess with Anna would break me, that it would define who I was. But I'm not who I was anymore, and I'm not sure what I feel about that. It's like part of me is relieved, but another part, I don't know. I think I'm afraid to let go of all that hurt." "You don't should have to let it go all at once," Clara said, her voice steady. "You can let go of the parts that don't serve you anymore, but the memories, they stay. It sets how we make peace with them that matters." I thought about that for a long time. How do you make peace with something that was never supposed to be a fight in the first place? The phone rang later that evening, interrupting the quiet. My heart did a quick, nervous flip. For a moment, I thought it might be Anna. But it wasn't. It was John, calling to check in. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Good," I replied, my voice steady. "It's been a quiet couple of months. I've been keeping busy." "That's good," John said. "Listen, I've been keeping tabs on Anna's situation. I know you weren't looking for any more drama, but I thought you should know she's reached out to a few people. It's been, well, let's just say, a little unexpected." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He paused for a second. "She's been talking about wanting to reconnect. She's been making some changes. She's getting help. She's started working through a lot of the things that happened between you two. I think she's genuinely trying to find a way forward." I sat back, taking in his words slowly. My first instinct was to feel defensive, to guard myself against another manipulation. But then a part of me couldn't ignore the small seed of curiosity, the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, Anna was trying to change for herself, not for me. "Is she asking for anything?" I asked carefully. "No," John replied, "but I thought you'd want to know. I know it's been a long road, but sometimes people surprise us. Just wanted to keep you in the loop." I thanked him, hanging up the phone with a strange, unfamiliar weight pressing on my chest. Could it be true? Was Anna really changing? Was she ready to face the consequences of her actions? Or was this just another part of her story, another way to get me to step back into her life on her terms? A few days later, I received another letter. This time it wasn't a bill or a simple apology. It was something more personal, more raw. "Dad, I know that what I did to you was unforgivable, and I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. But I'm writing this because I need you to know that I've been working on myself. I'm not the person I was when I left. I've been seeing a therapist, and I'm learning to understand why I hurt people, why I hurt you. I don't know if you'd ever want to talk to me again, but I hope you can believe me when I say that I said I'm trying to be better. I said I'm not asking you to fix me. I said I'm not asking for anything from you, but I wanted you to know that I said I'm sorry for everything and that I said I'm trying." I sat with the letter for a long time, my heart heavy. but not in the same way it had been before. Anna wasn't demanding anything from me. There were no strings attached, no manipulative guilt trips. This was different. For the first time, I felt the truth of her words. She wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She wasn't looking for anything but understanding. Maybe she'd finally come to terms with her own past, her own pain, and maybe that was the beginning of something else. Not a return to what we had, but a new kind of relationship, one that didn't rely on the lies or the manipulation, but on truth and perhaps acceptance. I didn't know what this would mean. I didn't know if I was ready to open the door to her again, but I knew that for the first time in years I wasn't holding on to the past with a death grip. I wasn't trying to force something that wasn't meant to be. The next day, I made the decision to write back. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. Because maybe, just maybe, there was still room for us in some form, some way. I didn't know how it would look or if it would ever work, but I was finally ready to leave the door open. Anna, I've read your letter and I want you to know that I hear you. I can't say that everything is fixed or that I'm ready to pick up where we left off. But I respect the steps you're taking to understand yourself, and I'm glad to hear you're getting help. That's something I can't ignore. I can't promise anything, but maybe one day we'll talk. Maybe one day we'll understand each other better. Until then, I'm letting go of the past. For me, if not for you. Take care of yourself. Phobian. I sealed the letter, my hands steady for the first time in years. Whether or not Anna and I ever rebuilt something, a friendship, a semblance of family, that was up to her now. The ball was in her court, and for the first time in a long time I was okay with that. The next morning I woke up to the sound of birds outside the window, the world still turning, still moving forward, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was stuck in the past anymore. There was peace in that. Maybe there were no clear endings. Maybe the resolution would never look like I thought it would, but in the end it wasn't about Anna. It was about me, and I had finally, after all these years, started to heal. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was free to live, to move forward, and that I realized was enough.